intentionally giving you a moment to appreciate. Go ahead. Not only hypocrisy, but as well, I would say, hypocritical irony. You know, you wouldn't think the National Association of Telemarketers, whose entire existence is built upon solicitation, would be upset with soliciting. But apparently they are. No soliciting at all. Well, if that were applied back to the company, I guess it wouldn't exist. Strange how that can work. Well, we have some hypocritical irony that's going on in our passage and in our study of Kings and Kingdoms, the united one. 2 Samuel chapter 17 is where we're going to be tonight. And as you're turning there, I want just to point out, and I hadn't done this yet, but I got to thinking about the hypocrisy involved. Of course, we have an attempted a coup, an overthrow of a government that's taking place in the Israelite nation. And Absalom, the son of David, has swooped in, driven his father out of town. And remember, he's stolen the hearts of the people of Israel. And he has many, and it would appear probably the majority, strangely, of Israel on his side to get rid of the true king and to usher himself in as such. Well, the takeover has already transpired. But I want you to think about for a minute, going back, why was Absalom originally expelled, I guess in a sense, or he fled anyway, from Israel? Why was that the case? Why did he leave the nation in the first place? Because he murdered his brother. Okay, I knew that would be the answer. And I knew I'd give this follow. That's a great answer, by the way. You're exactly right. And then I knew I'd give this follow-up question. Why did he murder his brother? What had his brother done? He what? Okay, very good. So he had committed incest and rape at that. It's incestual rape against his own sister. Now, it's his half-sister, Amnon. But for Absalom, that's his full-blooded sister, okay? So he had murdered and he had condemned his brother for committing incestual rape. Now, whenever Absalom gets in the position of power now, what's his first act as king based on the advice of one of his counselors? What act does he commit? Okay, very good. And what choice do you think these ladies have in the matter as far as this relationship that's going to take place and did? We already saw it between them. What choice? That's not their idea. That's not what they want to do. That's called rape, okay, if you look that up. Now, the fact that he takes his father's wives, biblically, in the book of Leviticus, this classifies as what kind of relationship? Incest. That's interesting. And so the very thing that he has condemned in his brother is his first act in what he thinks is going to take to be successful in his new life as king over Israel. That, my friends, is hypocritical irony. And the reason that he does this is on the basis of the advice that he's getting from his counselor. What's the name of his counselor that I've struggled saying for a month? We'll see if you're any better at it. Okay? Yeah, you like to laugh. Go ahead, Paul. Heffalump? No, that's not it. No, good. You about had it. Good. I'm pulling your leg. What is it? Ahithophel. Good. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who struggles. That's tough, isn't it? Ahithophel is correct. Okay, Ahithophel. All right, so that's his chief counselor. Now, there's another guy who's serving as an advisor of sorts, and what's his name? Two main guys, but there's no doubt the chief counselor at this point is Ahithophel. What's the other guy's name? I know, they're to us, they're wacky back then, but what's his name? Huh? It's not, but that's good. That's come up a lot, though. Good try. Okay, Hushai. There's so many, right? I mean, who can keep all these straight? I don't know if you're the same way, but I have to refresh every week to keep them straight, so I'm not holding you to it. But very good. So we have Hushai. Okay, so Ahithophel is a part of the effort to overthrow the government that's in place. He's there all along with Absalom. Hushai differs. How? He's serving as an advisor to Absalom, but why is he doing that? He's a spy. Very good. It's actually the idea of the true king of Israel, David. He says, listen, that's very nice that you want to be loyal to me and hang out with me here, but really you're of no use here. And he means it in a very respectful way. He says, where I could really use you is to go infiltrate behind enemy lines and pledge your allegiance to my son, Absalom, and then report back to me through the priests. So they're going to have this chain of command so they never know from where it's coming, and report back to me, and then I know what's going on. You're going to be my eyes and the ears in this faux kingdom that has been set up. Okay, so I bring that up about the counselors because we're going to finish talking about them tonight in chapter 17. Verse 1, 2 Samuel 17. Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, now let me choose. Okay, remember, actually, if you go back to the end of chapter 16, it's stated, we read in the end, I know it's strange, but in verse 23 of chapter 16, the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. He's so wise. He's accepted almost like a prophet of the Lord. Everyone hangs on his every word. So is the advice of Ahithophel both with David and with Absalom. So not just with the son, but also with the father. He's been a very wise individual. Verse 1 of our chapter. So Ahithophel said to Absalom, now let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. So all this is unfolded in a very small window. Seems a matter of days. David's essentially been driven out. Now he goes peacefully because he probably is going to die if he stays around in the capital city. But he gathers mostly all together except for his concubines, and probably would have been smart to have taken those along also. And he leaves, and then son comes not too far behind, and he just sets right up, and there's no opposition to be found in the holy city. Why do you think Ahithophel wants to get a group of 12,000 guys together right now and go after David? Why not let things cool for a few? You're just trying to get your administration settled in. Everyone's moving the furniture. Couldn't we wait? Why would we want to do it right now if you're in the mind of Ahithophel? Okay, this came out of nowhere. You're the king. Everyone loves you for several decades, and then news comes to you. You're not really accepted as a king anymore, and you better get out of town before they all lynch you. Okay? So, he doesn't have time to get much together. Yeah, total confusion and chaos, and you want to strike while the iron's hot. While the enemy's on their heels, now's the time to go out after him. To me, this seems to make a lot of sense, doesn't it you? So he says, let me have 12,000 men to the sitting king. I don't recognize him as king. I don't think God, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but I don't think God ever recognizes him as king either. He says, give me 12,000 men. I will personally arise, pursue your father, David, tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and weak and make him afraid. I don't know if Ahithophel would do that to David, but he thinks he can anyway. He says, and all the people who are with him, they'll scatter, they'll flee when they see us coming, and I will strike only the king. So his idea is, let's not go through this pervasive bloodshed. Let's not make a nasty scene. Let's just come in with all this force and scare everybody away who's with David. And then I'll just go to David and I'll kill him. And then here's his thinking about what's going to transpire following in verse 3. Then I will bring back all the people to you. When all return, except the man whom you seek, your father, the king, all the people will be at peace. And so what he's saying is we don't have to go through this prolonged civil war. This has happened not that far back in the nation's history. When the first king of Israel, Saul, passes from the scene, then once that transpires, there's confusion. Some recognize David. Down the road, some recognize Ishbosheth. So 7.5 years, there's this divide, and he's like, let's not go through all this. Let's just go kill the king. We'll bring everybody back together. They'll have to accept you as king, and so there's not the long war as before. It'll be a quick process. but we have to do it right now. We must strike while the iron's hot. Verse 4, and the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Now, if you're wanting to make a really good decision, what does a good leader do before a final decision of a pretty big matter is made? What does a leader typically do in gathering advice? Hear an idea, man, that sounds real. Okay, yeah, let's just go with that. Is that a good leader who's set up for long-term success? What does a good leader do? Okay, all right. Hey, let's just take a little while here. This is option 1. I can see the positives of that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay? Verse 5. You know, I don't want to get too far ahead, but it's a crying shame that Absalom is so self-absorbed with selfish ambitions because he could have made a great king. He had all the talent in the world. And I think that's partly why the nation's so torn. They want this guy to be the next king of Israel, but he's so self-absorbed that he just makes a mess of his life and a mess of the kingdom. It's really a shame. He has some good qualities about him, though. Verse 5, Absalom said, hey, I could see doing that right now, but I want to gather more resources. Now call Hushai, Kyle, the Archite also, and let us hear what he says, too. Let's put all options on the table. And when Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom spoke to him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken in this manner. What do you think? Should we do as he says? And if not, speak up. It's not like off with your head, you know. If you have a dissenting opinion, that's okay. Let's just talk about it and figure out what's best for the kingdom. So Hushai said to Absalom, the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good at this time. And what he suggests by that is, you know, this could be a good plan, but because of what the setting is right now, you do not want to do that right now. Well, we've already established that it makes a lot of sense to do it now, and time may be of the essence because you have the upper hand. You probably don't want to wait around. Well, he explains in verse 8, 4 said Hushai, you know your father and his men. You're not just dealing with an old ruler, nor are you just dealing with some typical soldiers. He says, don't forget who these guys are and the things they've done in their lives. They're the mighty men. Don't forget that your father was the one who brought down the Philistine giant that no one wanted to face. Don't forget all the giants that they've slain. Don't forget how many times they've been outnumbered, 10, 20, 100, 200 to 1, and they've overcome all odds. Don't underestimate these guys. What do you think so far? Is that making some sense to you? Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, don't you? Here's another issue. They are enraged in their minds. Now, why do you think they'd be so upset, these guys? David and his men. So from the perspective of for David, well, God's chosen him, right? The perspective of his men, they love him. He's been overall a good ruler, a good king for Israel, and so that'd make a lot of sense. They're enraged in their minds. Here's the other thing. They've had their entire lives stolen from them. Their houses are gone because people took them from them. Their positions of power are gone because people took it. All of their wealth is gone because people took it from them. In the case of David, how would you feel if, I know he has a lot of women that he shouldn't have. Nevertheless, he's married to these, and if someone takes your spouse and does to your spouse what Absalom has done to David's wife, how would you feel about that? You got to be careful about upsetting a grown man. I remember, I think I want to say it was maybe 2007. Some of you football fans double check me on that. But the New England Patriots did what no other team has ever done, still hasn't done, and I don't know if it'll ever happen again, but they went undefeated in the regular season, 16-0, just an unstoppable juggernaut. Stormed through the playoffs, 18-0, and they were looking to go 19-0. They went up in the Super Bowl against a 10-6 Giants, New York Giants wild card club. I mean, they snuck in the playoffs. They got hot at the right time in the season. Nobody gave this a team a chance for 2 weeks. They heard for 2 weeks how they couldn't do it. They weren't good enough. They weren't fast enough. They couldn't match up with the talent. No way it would ever happen. This team was going to go undefeated all the way through and be the first team to do it in a 16-game season. Well, many of you know that the Patriots lost that game, and it's pretty interesting to hear in the stories after, and the guys talking about how they got so mad about hearing all week about how they weren't man enough, they weren't fast enough, they weren't smart enough, they couldn't game plan, everything. They just weren't good enough all the way around. Made them mad. And I'll tell you right now, that team had no business beating the other. There's no question which of the better teams, or which one was the better team, but all you have to do is be better one day, and that's enough. Bible camp this last year, I played a lot of ping pong, kind of like on our spring retreat, Chet. But early on, I was in Chet's position. Man, I was probably because of how you sharpened me at the I was smoking. Everyone is coming up against us. I was undefeated. I can't remember how many games and how many opponents. There's this high school girl who wanted to play me. And we played, and I beat her. We played again, and I beat her. Oh, man, she was upset. I think it may have been the third time or something we played a game, and I beat her. It's getting a little closer, though, each time. And she's real upset with herself, all the mistakes she was making. And I told her I made a storming comeback to win the game. And I said, I can't stand to lose. No, I mean, like, I really can't stand to lose. And I was just saying it as a statement of fact. I mean, that's the truth. Well, she took that as a real insult, as if she can stand losing better than I can. I hadn't thought about it from her perspective. I mean to tell you, for the next 4 days, we probably played 11 times, and she probably won 8 or 9. She smoked me the rest of the time. I made her mad. You make another human being mad, and you don't want to underestimate the results that can come from that. David and his men are mad because of what's been done to them, the insults that have been given to them, the things that have been stolen. And so Hushai says, don't forget, this is your dad took down the giant. These are the mighty soldiers who are with him, who have slain many giants in their lives, who have overcome all sorts of odds you wouldn't believe. And they are mad. They're enraged in their minds. And there's a natural explanation for this, the adrenaline. If there's a car on somebody and it's burning, it's amazing how just a normal man can lift up that car. He doesn't have the strength to do that. But when the brain sends the signals to send some more drug to the body, it can happen. These guys are going to be filled with adrenaline, he says, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. I don't ever want to meet a bear in the wild. Some animals I do, but not a bear. But I know that if I met a bear in the wild and I was carrying its cute cub and I was petting its fur, I wouldn't stand a chance. That thing would tear me apart because of the rage God has built into the mind of that creature. He says, these men are going to be like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. You will not stand a chance right now. And in addition to that, your father is a man of war. Hey, you're a really good-looking guy. You could be on the front of the magazine, in the nation, but this guy, he's a mean fella. You don't want to mess with him. He has experience. He's outsmarted anybody and everybody 100 times over. He knows war like the back of his hand. He's so much more experienced than what you do. And he will not camp with the people. I know him. He's going to send the people away. He's not going to be with them. And if your plan is to go in and to scare off all the people who are with him, it's not going to work because the people aren't going to be with him either. Anyway, he's smarter than that. Keep that in mind. So as we go down into verse 9, we find, surely by now, he explains, he's already hidden in some pit anyway, or in some other place. Even if you go try to find him out, you're not going to be able to locate him. It'll take so long. And it will be that when some of the people you do encounter are overthrown at the first, that whoever hears it will say, there's a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. Therefore I advise that all Israel be fully gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba. We know what that is by now. It's not on the map, but all the way up to the north, all the way down to the south, Beersheba is. For all Israel knows this. I advise you that all Israel be fully gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba, like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. All right, so what is it essentially that is being suggested here by the other advisor, Hushai, compared and really contrasted with Ahithophel's advice? I see mainly three things that stand out. Ahithophel says time-wise what needs to happen? Now, yesterday. Okay? Now that's Ahithophel. Okay? What does Hushai say? Let's just let things calm down. Let the emotions go back, okay, for a while. And then we find here in the end that it's suggested by Hushai, the second guy, how many people need to go against David? Okay, let's get everyone involved. And that's going to take some time to do that. What was the idea of Ahithophel? How many people need to go? I mean, that's still quite a bit, 12,000. But he's saying, no, we need to get all those in number like sand by the seashore. Okay, we need to get hundreds of thousands to go against him because of how strong that he is. What is the suggestion on the part of Ahithophel as far as who needs to kill David? Who needs to kill David? I'll take care of it myself. What's the suggestion of Hushai? Who should kill David? Okay, he says, you need to go lead the troops out. You need to be the one. All right, the people are going to look to you. They're going to think you're a cow. Even if there's success in the mission, they want a king who will go out and who will fight their battles for them. So it's really like polar opposite advice here that's been given. There's still more to come, though. He mentions, verse 12, so we will come upon him in some place where he may be found. And we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and all the men who are with him, there shall not be left so much as one. As far as who needs to die, what does Ahithophel, the first guy, say? Who needs to die? Ahithophel, the first one. One guy, David. Okay, what's the advice of Hushai? Who should die? Everyone who is a part of the rebel activity. He says we're going to eliminate the whole movement in one swath. Verse 13, moreover, if he is withdrawn into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will pull it into the river. I'm going to say there's probably some hyperbole that's involved there, until there is not one small stone found there. All right, so now he has two options. Two completely contrasting ones from one another. What choice will he make? And who can say it for us from our ever so lengthy memory verse? Oh, okay. Paul, go ahead. Perfect. Wow, very well done. Now, I don't know about you, for those who did it, but it wasn't nearly as bad as what I thought it would be. It went a little bit quicker, but it's tough, though, keeping it. Very good, Paul. That's excellent. All right. So isn't that funny? Have you ever watched a Dateline show? And the case will be made on one side. You're like, oh, man, the dude is guilty as sin. Guaranteed. Just open, shut case. And then there's some arguments and evidence brought out on the other side, and you're like, whoa, no. Innocent, 100%, guaranteed. And you watch the rest of the show, and by the end, it turns out he's guilty. All right? You're so swayed. The evidence is so strong. There are good arguments that are made here on both sides, but it's funny. I find it's like watching a Dateline show. When they hear the advice of Ahithophel, all of them, 100%, that's it. That's what we need to do. completely opposite advice is given. And once they hear it, 100% of them say, Hushai is right. That's the one we need to follow. I also find it fascinating that we're told in Scripture that what Ahithophel stated was good advice and actually better. And we're going to find that out as we move on into verse 15. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, these are the ones through whom he's communicating, so they have this intelligent, or this network of intelligence that they're passing this through. They're kind of playing telephone. So Hushai tells the priests, thus and so Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus and so I have advised. I want you to know everything in the conversation, how it went. And I think they're probably preparing just in case the king has a change of heart or something. Hey, they've talked about this also, even though they seem to be siding with mine. Verse 16, now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, do not spend this night where you are in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up. Now, in the advice that Hushai gave to the king, what did he say about the king where he likely was? Hidden away in like a pit or like in caves. He's surely in the hillside, the mountains anyway. Here we find out he actually knows that he's where? In the wide open plains, the opposite of what he said. He also told Hushai, what about the people? You're wanting to scare off all the people who are with him? Well, that's not going to work. Why? King's smarter than that. King's going to be where? Relative to the people. He's going to be separated from the people. But when Hushai sends his communication, he says, hey, you need to get out of the plains, in the wide open, cross over as fast as you can, lest the king and all the people who are with you, the opposite of what he had stated. And so you see, he is keeping his word, and he's being loyal to the true crown, and informing the king of what's going on. And he's advising the opposite of everything that the fake king should be doing. All right, now in verse 17. Jonathan and Ahimaaz, which are the sons of the priests we found out back in chapter 15, they were staying at Enrogel. They're staying at Enrogel, and that's going to be in this general area. For they dared not to be seen coming into the city. So, they're going to camouflage this. A female servant, someone you wouldn't expect, a female servant would come and tell them, and they would go and tell what's going on to King David. Nevertheless, there's an intelligence network on the other side also, and a lad, someone you wouldn't expect to be involved in this exchange of information and war, a lad, a young boy, saw them and went and told Absalom. But both of them went away quickly and came to a man's house in Bahurim, and that's just up from Jerusalem on the map, just a couple of miles. We've talked about that one also. So these people aren't far away, but remember the unfolding of these events isn't a matter of a day or days, and there hasn't been a lot of time to separate distance yet between them. Both of them went away quickly, these spies, and they came to this man's house in Bahurim who had a well in his court, and they went down into it. Women took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and spread ground grain on it. Looked like it had been there for a while. And the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? So the woman said to them, well, they've gone that direction, over the water brook. Not so. And when they had searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. This reminds me of things that you watch like on the Revolutionary War and the spy. It's kind of neat, the way this is working. I mean, it's war and civil conflict that's taking place here. So they leave, they go back to Jerusalem just a few miles down to the south. They report, well, we tried to find the spies. We couldn't identify them. Verse 21, it came to pass after they had departed that they came up out of the well and went and told King David. And said to David, arise and cross over the water quickly, that is over the Jordan River, for thus has Ahithophel advised against you. So David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed over the Jordan. By morning light, not one of them was left who had not gone over the Jordan. So now they're starting to separate a little bit more territory from Jerusalem than what they were able to early on. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, someone else has become apparently the chief advisor over him, and he's not viewed so highly. They're not bragging on him any longer. He saddled a donkey, he arose, and he went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself and died. You know, if he can't be the revered one, if he can't have the position of prominence in the kingdom, he might as well not live. And that gives you an idea as to what his motivations for life and in the kingdom were. He was buried in his father's tomb. Verse 24, then David went to Mahanaim. All right, let's identify that on the map. Mahanaim. He's crossed the Jordan River from Bahurim, so it's a latitude of this, and then he goes up and just to the left there, Mahanaim in the land of Gilead. Does anybody recall why that was a significant place earlier on in the book? Mahanaim. It sounds familiar. That's where Ishbosheth was termed, or where he was crowned, and he receives the kingship of eastern Israel and as well the northern section. Remember, it's Judah that stays with King David, and he rules over that for 7.5 years. Ishbosheth reigns for 2 years over northern Israel and also the territory east of the Jordan River. Joab helps secure, or Abner does, all the following for him. So he goes to that place where Ishbosheth was crowned king over the northern section of Israel during the civil conflict, and Absalom crossed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. So now he's trying to hunt down his father. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the army instead of Joab. This Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Jithra, an Israelite, who had gone into Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. That's a lot of information. I sorted through it, and we don't have much time, and I'll tell you this. What I can make of it, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's Joab's first cousin. Okay, you look through and see if you determine the same thing. It looks like Joab's first cousin to me, Amasa, who's made captain of the army instead of Joab. Verse 26, so Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. So they're on the east side of the river. They're hot on the trail of David trying to kill him. Verse 27, now it happened when David had come to Mahanaim that Shobai, the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the people of Ammon, Machir, the son of Amiel from Lodabar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite from Rajalim, brought beds and basins, earthen vessels and wheat, barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds. Oh man, this is a meal fit for a king, isn't it? Honey and curds, sheep and cheese of the herd. I didn't count, but we might be dealing with a 10-course meal at this point. It's going to be pretty tasty stuff. For David and the people who are with him, for they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. If we had more time, we'd talk about each one of those individuals, but we don't. I do want to point out, though, going down through verse 29, it's interesting. David and his loyalists, they have to just pack up and they have to get out of Dodge so they can survive this experience. They don't even have enough supplies to make it. They don't know how long they're going to have to be gone. They don't know if they're ever going back. And yet, we don't have an indication that they even had to ask for food. All the food and the supplies that they need are brought to them. There's a neat remark that David makes late in his life. Psalm 37, verse 25. Verse 25 of Psalm 37. He said, I once was young, not anymore. Now I'm old. And yet he says, I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. Remember what Jesus told us in the 6th chapter of Matthew? Don't worry about the physical things. I know there are a lot of things out there that can concern you. He said, worry about the spiritual things. Put those first, and what's the guarantee that Jesus makes? All these things, food, water, clothing, shelter. I'll make sure that you always have them. Now, you might not be able to supply them all yourself, but I'll make sure they get to you some way or another. And isn't that neat? They leave Jerusalem. They don't have anything really that they need. Clothes on their back. You'd think, we might starve to death. Not when you're following God. He'll get everything you need. He sends a meal fit for the king, out to the king in the middle of the wilderness. God always takes care of his own. I think maybe that's the strongest lesson that we can take out of chapter 17 of 2 Samuel. I do want to close with this, though. Jesus makes a warning in the 7th chapter, right after that teaching he gives in the same setting, Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. He says, "Judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you use, you will be judged. And with the measure you deal out, it will be measured back to you." And what he's saying there is not that you should never judge anyone under any circumstance. He just says, be careful about the judgments that you make. Be careful about the standards that you use. Be careful about how much you demand of others, because God's going to demand exactly that much of you in return. What he's saying is make sure that you aren't a hypocrite in the judgments that you make. Now, think about just a little bit earlier. Absalom, who's the sitting false king of Israel, had made the determination that his brother deserved to die because of his incestual rape of his sister. And then he commits the very deed that his brother did that made him so sick, incestual rape with his father's wives. Now, according to Absalom, what should happen to someone who's committed such a deed? He should die. I want you to keep that in mind for next week's study as we get into chapter 18. Be careful of the standard that you use, because it's the same standard that God is going to use with us. All right, so next week, read chapter 18, please. And we're going to memorize one that has a little bit of length again, Paul, but it's not quite as bad, I don't think. We can do it. Last verse, 33, 2 Samuel 18. The standard he uses for his deeds are death. Will it be measured back to him? We'll find out next week. All right, appreciate the comments.